Parents and kids, Bill Nye claims that creationism is not appropriate for children. I say, oh really? What does factual history and real science actually support? What is your real agenda, Bill? Let's review Bill Nye's transcript in bite sizes and expose his fallacies and compare it with the historical facts and evidence.
Denial of evolution is unique to the United States. We are the world's most advanced technological, you could say Japan, but generally the United States is where most of the innovation still happens. People still move to the United States, and that's largely because of the intellectual capital we have, the general understanding of science. When you have a portion of the population that doesn't believe in it, it holds everybody back, really.
Bill's statements are fallacious. He begins by associating the notion of evolution with the intellectual capital people making advancements in innovation/technology, and that an alleged minority that deny the notion of evolution are by their denial lacking a general understanding of science and are holding up advancements. You will find that he is using the following fallacious tactics: the argumentum ad populum, which is the bandwagon argument; the false analogy that makes a false comparison; the appeal to accomplishment of unrelated causation; the appeal to consequences if you don't share his pseudoscientific worldview; the appeal to emotion of various types instead of using valid reasoning, i.e. to ridicule, spite, and fear if you are not on his side; the appeal to authority or from authority as if he was all-knowing and an expert witness; the psychologist fallacy as if he has an objective perspective that is without presumptions or an agenda; and the correlation proves causation, that the creationist worldview is the causation of the rift between science and advancement of the sciences. The next soundbite is patently absurd and laughable.
Evolution is the fundamental idea in all of life science, in all of biology. It's very much analogous to trying to do geology without believing in tectonic plates. You're just not going to get the right answer. Your whole world is just going to be a mystery instead of an exciting place.
In this next segment, Bill Nye is a revisionist historian. The fact of history is that the baseless notion of evolution, the atheistic alternative to creation by God, was concocted without a scientific understanding of biology, genetics, physical sciences, geology, chemistry, etc., and without evidence, and without using the scientific method of inquiry, and without peer review and support. Modern science falsifies the notion of evolution, and so does all the evidence. Another fact of history is that in 1858, Antonio Snider Pellegrini, 1802 to 1885, a creationist Christian French geographer and scientist, who published his book, the French translation is The Creation and Its Mysteries Unveiled, where he proposed/theorized correctly with his creationist worldview long before modern confirmation of plate tectonics that all the continents were once connected together, since he had found plant fossils in both Europe and the United States that were identical. He also found matching fossils on all of the continents. He also attributed the cause of the fragmentation of the supercontinent to the great global flood that Noah, the eyewitness survivor, described in the Bible. The next soundbite is equally patently absurd and unscientific.
As my old professor Carl Sagan said, when you're in love, you want to tell the world. So once in a while I get people that claim they don't believe in evolution. And my response generally is, so why not? Really, why not? Your world just becomes fantastically complicated when you don't believe in evolution. Here are these ancient dinosaur bones or fossils. Here's radioactivity. Here are distant stars that are just like our star, but they're at a different point in their life cycle. The idea of deep time, of billions of years, explains so much of the world around us. If you try to ignore that, your worldview just becomes crazy. It's just untenable, self-inconsistent.
In this portion, Bill Nye is using the fallacious, cherry-picking fallacy with atheistic pseudoscience to twist the reality of that evidence selected and overlook the evidence that is contrary. Dinosaurs and fossils are not the product of the notion of evolution, and therefore is false evidence hijacked for evolution. The alleged Descent with modification with the occasional deleterious mutations and the useless natural selection are not mechanisms that formed the fossils or the fossiliferous sedimentary layers, or that is responsible for the transmutation of one kind of organism into a totally different kind, i.e. an ape-like creature changing into a human. Many lines of evidence make deep time impossible, such as measurable radioactive carbon-14 in coal, natural gas, oil, diamonds, and fossils. The soft tissues and food eaten found in dinosaur fossils, the magnetic field decay rate of the planet, lunar recession, short-period comets, and many more to falsify deep time and evolutionism. More facts about evolutionism for Bill Nye. Evolution was concocted by the fantasizing atheistic sort to provide their faith with an alternative to special creation by a superior intelligence / being known as God. However, note that these atheists did so without using the scientific method that requires the direct observation and repeated testing of, and evidence for, and without a mechanism for, and without being able to reproduce the following fantasy of spontaneous generation, now called abiogenesis, of the alleged common ancestor of all, that is scientifically impossible by materialistic notions, and which was nicely refuted by the scientific work of Louis Pasteur and his law of biogenesis. The impossible transmutation of one kind of organism / kind into a different organism / kind via descent with modification with occasional mutations and natural selection by environmental pressure, or by a Lamarckistic style storytelling that was expected to be found in the fossil record made by the global flood of Noah, and not by mythological evolution. The cell, DNA and the code, genome, genes, amino acids, biological machines, etc., i.e. without knowledge science of genetics that the Darwin family and the company of evolution popularizers didn't know. The information specified in the genome of every living organism that is responsible for all that exists, which materialism cannot contrive. There is no end to his delusional state of mind.
And I say to the grown-ups, if you want to deny evolution and live in your world that's completely inconsistent with everything we observe in the universe, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them. We need scientifically literate voters and taxpayers for the future. We need people that can, we need engineers that can build stuff, solve problems.
Bill Nye's fallacies continue with the deceptive emotional prayer that creationists can't be engineers unless they are evolutionists. The fact of history is that creationist Christians founded the scientific method and established many of the scientific laws and principles in use today. The creationist Christian Isaac Newton was a physicist, mathematician, astronomer, natural philosopher, alchemist, and theologian. Is considered by many to be the greatest and most influential scientist who ever lived. Though Isaac Newton lived before Darwin, Isaac Newton was not unacquainted with the atheistic, evolutionary, naturalistic / materialistic notion of on origins. He was convinced against it and wrote, "Blind metaphysical necessity, which is certainly the same always and everywhere, could produce no variety of things. All that diversity of natural things which we find suited to different times and places could arise from nothing but the ideas and will of a being, God, necessarily existing." Isaac Newton. In 1898, Andrew Dickson White, the founder and first president of Cornell University, wrote History of the Warfare of Science with Theology in Christendom. This book was required reading in many schools, and his message was told in movies to deceive children. A.D. White later admitted writing this book to get even with Christian critics of his Cornell University plan. Rodney Stark, For the Glory of God, August 9, 2004, exposes these notable lies below that White told amongst many other lies. That Columbus faced years of opposition from the Roman Catholic Church, which opposed the alleged biblical teaching that the world is flat. The fact was that every educated person knew the earth was spherical, including the Roman Catholic Church, from biblical teaching. That in 1492, Christopher Columbus proved the world is spherical as a victory for science. That in 1519, Magellan also proved that the earth is spherical when he circumnavigated the earth to claim another victory for science against biblical understanding, and that opposition lasted another 200 years. Bill Nye, like many others before him, to beyond Aristotle, through to modern figures like Carl Sagan, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and many other common folk, including atheistic evolutionary YouTubers, use lies to cause a false schism about biblical truth and real science. The weapon of choice in their atheistic battle against the truth of God is disinformation, i.e. lies. Some conclusions that Rodney Stark's book reveals about the historical reality and the agenda of the militant atheists. The Enlightenment was conceived initially as a propaganda ploy by militant atheists and humanists, example Voltaire, Diderot, Gibbon, who attempted to claim credit for the rise of science through promulgating the falsehood that science required the defeat of religion. It is the consensus among contemporary historians, philosophers, and sociologists of science that real science arose only once. In Europe, the leading scientific figures of the 16th and 17th centuries were overwhelmingly devout Christians who believed it their duty to comprehend God's handiwork. A scientific revolution, like the term Dark Ages, was coined to discredit the medieval church. The notion has been used to claim that science burst forth only when weakened Christianity could no longer prevent it, and as the recovery of classical learning made it possible. Both claims are false, and those concerning Columbus and the flat earth. Various other excerpts. Christian theology was essential for the rise of science. Religion did not cause the Dark Ages. Nothing else did either. The story that after the fall of Rome a long dark night of ignorance and superstition settled over Europe is as fictional as the Columbus story. In fact, this was an era of profound and rapid technological progress. The scientific revolution of the 16th century was the result of Christian scholarship starting in the 11th century. Bill Nye is delusional and doesn't know that all evidence is common to all worldviews and doesn't speak for itself.
It's just really a hard thing. It's really a hard thing. In another couple centuries, that worldview, I'm sure, just won't exist. There's no evidence for it.
There is no end to Bill Nye's fallacious way. Now he's denying that the evidence only points to special creation by God, a superior intelligence/being. Since human intelligence and science can't reproduce the world or mimic God's creation, and that it's impossible for non-living and mindless chemical element to make the world. The evidence also supports a catastrophic judgment of the world with the global flood of Noah that caused the fossiliferous sedimentary layer with billions of fossils of flora and fauna on a global scale. The billions of flora and fauna were suddenly buried by mineral-rich water-borne sediment before they would have been eliminated by decay or scavenging by other animals and insects within a deep time worldview of uniformitarianism. The global fossiliferous sedimentary layers were deposited as part of one global catastrophic epoch, since there is no sign of life between the layers that would have caused bioturbation, i.e. wormholes, animal boreholes, foot traffic, and climatic erosion by wind and water. Therefore, I submit to you parents and to you children that Bill Nye is not a science guy. He is a mechanical engineer by education and has an humanistic worldview committed to evolutionism, which is responsible for much evil in this world. Do you want your children or friends to be like the evolutionist high school shooters in Finland and Columbine that murdered their fellow human students they considered unfit to survive, just like Adolf Hitler did with more than 50 million people to help natural selection? Atheistic evolutionism is evil, not creation science or creationist scientists that have made the modern advancements in science and technology possible. Bill Nye, the science guy, is an oxymoronic moniker for a certified pseudoscience, pseudo-knowledge conveyor, and thereby a pseudoscientist.